avoidance is not leadership. We have to address the misalignment before it turns into something greater that we didn't intend. What you tolerate quietly becomes what you have to manage loudly later.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm Chad Peterman, and today we have a special episode hosted by our COO here at Peterman Brothers, Mr. Andrew Hasty. Andrew spent a ton of time in the educational space and has a ton of insight into leadership, motivation, and helping others learn. We hope you enjoy his stuff from a future leaders session that we run here at Peterman Brothers. Take a listen and let us know what you think.
It was interesting, actually. One of the books I took with me, we've talked about Morris Jenkins before, but their former president, Jonathan Bancroft, who I think is like Chad's official mentor, and now their current president is like my unofficial mentor. He still doesn't know it yet, but he is. But I read Mr. Jenkins Told Me, or Mr. Jenkins Said, is that what it is? It's like a really good, like, sit down one read, about, all of the things that like allowed Morris Jenkins to turn into the absolute, beast that it is. But it's like at the foundation of who they are, it's like two rules. It's like their culture and their customers. And, one of the things that they talk about is that, it's actually like when you have meetings, you should use that as an opportunity to make sure that everyone feels informed. And in the book, he talks about when he was diagnosed with leukemia. This is in no way, shape, or form where I was planning to start the conversation today. So we're going to shift dramatically here pretty soon. But like getting leukemia, and in the midst of getting leukemia, one of his like lead trainers decided that, the Jenkins, so Mr. Jenkins, who bought Morris Heating and Air and made it Morris Jenkins, the owner was leaving, and Jonathan, who was kind of, what people were seeing as like the second in command, had leukemia, so he was dying. So he started spreading this rumor. He quits, joins a competitor, and starts poaching people from Morris Jenkins, and kind of like super effed up, right? But he says like one of the biggest learnings from that experience was that he realized that when he was going through even a personal thing, that he wasn't transparent. And, he was like, I don't want to put my burden on other people, but he's like, I was actually obligated to share where I was in my diagnosis, to share where I was in my journey, my recovery, to provide clarity, to provide confidence, to provide understanding. Which I just thought was like such a really interesting thing as I was like going through all these delays, and I was pissed off at the world. And I was like, there's just so many things to be grateful for. One of which is, we are not like in a war that's consuming the entire country, the world. So that's great. There's like micro wars going on. So, but there's not like a world war, like a World War II, which is not what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to talk about World War I. And I was like thinking about all the topics that we've kind of like covered that were either in books or we've sort of riffed and came up with more of a potluck style. And when I kept looking at like some of the major themes, they really connected with stories that I know from World War I. And I'm sorry, I can't help it. And so I'm going to try to thread that needle today. For those of you who don't know, and I brought it up before, World War I was like the product of a lot of entangling alliances. So essentially all across Europe, there was this web of connections. And if one country ended up being pulled into a conflict, then all countries ended up being pulled into a conflict. But, leaders, like when you go back in that time, like no one intended for there to be a war. Like that wasn't the intention, right? I see some heads nodding. Like, yeah, no, like I don't intend to make someone have a shitty day. I don't intend to have a shitty day myself. I don't intend to piss off a customer. Dispatch didn't intend to send me and ruin my day. It's like no one intended for there to be one of like the worst wars in the history of the world. They just avoided. They just simply avoided the uncomfortable conversations that needed to break unhealthy obligations. Which is crazy if you think about that. It's like they just kind of hoped that problems would like work themselves out. And the problems didn't work themselves out. And you get this regional event. I think I botched the name last night, but Archduke, sorry, not Archbishop, grew up Catholic, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he gets assassinated, and then all of these alliances they all fall like dominoes. And so when I reflect on some of the things we've talked about this year, how does that relate? Unclear expectations, right? Tolerating a bad attitude from a top producer. I take a lot of pride in knowing that we've let some top producers in this organization go because they had bad attitudes. And I take a lot of pride in knowing that some of those top producers who had bad attitudes grew up and realized that the grass is green where you water it, and you take care of yourself and your people. And some of those people have come back as boomerang hires, which couldn't make me happier. But remember, it's like when we talk about when you tolerate something that is against the standard of excellence that we hold, then you are giving permission for mediocrity. Right? Another thing I wrote down is allowing gossip because it's uncomfortable to address. Letting departments step around conflict instead of through it. Protecting high performers who damage the culture, not just have a bad attitude. Letting small standards slip. Just this one time. I'm just going to let it slip just this one time. Allowing unresolved tension between you and a colleague. And then the last one I thought was the most relevant is avoiding hard conversations to keep the peace, which is what a dozen or so leaders in Europe did in a time, right, of uncertainty because expectations were unclear, alliances were secret, conversations weren't on the table, and everyone just assumed, well, this will work itself out. Again, no one wanted to go to war. And so these modern sort of entangling alliances that we deal with every single day are probably the very things that are preventing us from reaching the level of greatness that we know we aspire to. And I think that small misalignments can become really big cultural problems if we don't address them early, right? So the way I kind of thought about this is like the dangers of passive leadership, right? Because we've talked about it a million times, right? And it's like, it could probably sound like a broken record at this point, but we're always going to talk about it. Like, it's not something like we don't just talk about it one time and then let it go. It's avoidance is not leadership. Like, that is the message. Avoidance is not leadership. We have to address the misalignment before it turns into something greater that we didn't intend, right? And so just remember that what you tolerate quietly becomes what you have to manage loudly later. Right? So that's the first lesson I thought about when I thought about World War I, is what we've talked about before is passive leadership and not addressing things head on. The other thing that came to mind is the battlefields themselves. And we had a conversation several weeks ago, and I think we actually talked about World War II to address this. This was actually back in February, I think. We talked about how the French built the Maginot Line to stop a German offensive, and the Germans just went around it, right? Because France was preparing to fight the same war that they fought in the past and refusing to iterate and innovate and fight a new type of war. Well, the same thing happened in World War I. World War I, you saw the arrival of the machine gun. You saw the arrival of barbed wire, long-range artillery, tanks, and one of the craziest things, poison gas. And yet, the way that some of the commanders in World War I, like, still blows my mind. Some of the commanders still fought this like frontal Napoleonic like assault, right? Like line up in formation and go straight into no man's land with long range artillery, barbed wire that you can't pass through, and a machine gun that's firing off more rounds than you've ever experienced in warfare, right? But just keep it's a law of attrition, right? It's you're just hoping that you have more people to expend than the other side. It blows my mind walking in a straight line into like an automatic weapon because generals just generally refuse to rethink their own assumptions about warfare. And millions of people died because of that lack of adaptation. And so how does that relate to us? Because we've talked about it, right? We've talked about as we continue to grow, same thing in the book that came up this was like a mind blowing thing for me. Jonathan Bancroft says, when he's talking about Morris Jenkins, he says that when you double in size, complexities don't double. They increase by a factor of 12. When you double inside, your complexity doesn't double. It increases by a factor of 12. I don't know what the Greek prefix to 12, decadon, I don't know, increased by a factor of 12, which is mind-blowing. And so as we go into our processes, as we do the things that we do, as we coach people, as we hold people accountable, you have to think to yourself, am I running meetings the way that I've always done it? Or am I addressing the needs of my people and understanding that the needs of my people are constantly changing? Am I constantly evolving to figure out ways to connect with my people? We've seen it a million times, even in this industry, right? I've had managers tell me, like, I'm more of like a hard ass as it comes to these things. I'm like, okay, well, good luck with that. Because the people that you manage don't respond the same way that you did, or the way you got into this field did 30, 40 years ago. And I think one of the things I've loved is seeing on this team that like adaptation of like personal leadership style that we've seen with our people. Right? Because your people, the attitude of your people reflect your leadership. Right? And I think every single day seeing managers who are willing to even remold themselves and reshape themselves and who they are and their professional personality is a credit to, I think, the growth and willingness that we've all had to be adaptable. In World War I, not so much. So if you're rejecting, I put new field professionals, right? Who are coming maybe with different ideas or from a different background. If we have new routing logic that we've seen with ProBook, right? New sales processes, or new home, like how we work with customers, a membership program, all these things that we've changed, right? Are examples of how we've been willing to iterate and innovate and adapt. And think about all the examples throughout your day where we haven't been willing to do that, where we've just done things the safe way because, well, they were safe and it's what we've always done before. It's like expecting a field professional to exceed expectations if we're implementing the same thing. We had a conversation the other day about Peterman Way service. And I was like, okay, he's been here for over 3 years. Like, yeah. I was like, well, has Peterman Way service changed in the last 2 years? No. Okay. Well, should he have to go in there for 2 days and learn the exact same? Like, yeah, if he's struggling, fine, it's remediation. But like, if this is someone who's running our processes and has experienced success in the field, then like we have to iterate the training to bring them to the next level. And we can't just like run them back through. Oh, it's one every year. They got to go through it. It was like, well, then make it different for those people that are going back through it. Right? Right? I mean, I think one of my favorite ones, marketing folks will appreciate this, is assuming that the customer mindset is the same as it was before digital transparency. And I think it's really hard because a lot of our job is to sit here in these gaps and these broken things and fix, improve, optimize, fix. And it's like, dang, we are doing so many darn good things. And I think it's hard to forget about that. The leaders who adapt win. It's as simple as that. If you're willing to adapt, you will win. Whether that's for the team, whether that's for the customer, whether that's for the organization. The ones who don't, you're going to get left behind. It's as simple as that. And I would say this, like, even if you have the best of intentions, like the leaders did pre-World War I, You can want what's best for your people. You can want what's best for the customer. You can have the best of intentions. But if we fail to adapt, that ain't going to work. Right? Because the reality is yesterday's success formulas become the failure points of today. Right? Leaders have got to update their playbook. Right? We expect the same from the field. Leaders have to do the same thing. So lesson number 1 was passive leadership. Lesson number 2 is the generals who refused to adapt and the consequences that brought. Lesson number 3 is Christmas, which I think is a great lesson. When I was in high school, I learned about this thing that was called Silent Night, which was like a German song. And I could be wrong on this. Maybe it was just that was playing when this story was explained. But it goes something like a little bit like it was Christmas Eve and you had soldiers in like opposing trenches. This is true. I'm not making this up. This is not just the Silent Night thing. I just don't know if that was where the roots of that, I don't know. It's got some religious components, but I mean, now that I think about it, I'm sure Silent Night predates World War II in 1914. So it just must have been the song playing in the background. But the soldiers in opposing trenches started singing Christmas carols. Well, there you go. There's your, right? So they're singing Christmas carols. The next day, on Christmas Day, you got to remember, this is trench warfare. This is Napoleonic straight line formation going into machine gun fire, right? This is poison gas. This is tanks. This is long range artillery. Christmas morning, they wake up and they climb out of their trenches. They walk across no man's land, shook hands, exchanged gifts. I'm really curious as to like what those gifts like, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like it's a German like hand stick grenade versus, you know, and some of them actually played soccer. There was no orders, there was no treaties. It was just pure raw, just humanity. And you know, obviously the commanders on both sides like were pissed off about it, and then truces that were short term got broken down and people went back to their trenches and continued killing each other. But like for that one moment on Christmas Day, I think the soldiers proved something really powerful, that like you can be disciplined and humane at the same time, right? You can follow a process and deliver like premium customer service at the same time. You can be focused on something and also duality can't exist. Like two things can be true at the same time. I think as Americans, we really struggle with that. Two things can be true simultaneously. It doesn't have to be this side, that party or that party. Like two things can exist and be true at the same time. And I think about us as managers and as leaders, and it's like there's this pressure to hit numbers, to enforce policies. Did you read online? For section B, line 4, the vehicle policy, it clearly like we have to hold people accountable, and that's hard. Humans are unpredictable and tough, but like we fail when we believe that professionalism requires like this emotional distance. It doesn't. We've talked about psychological safety. We've talked about strength through vulnerability, and I think that this is just a good reminder that, you know, our people have bad weeks. Our people lose parents, right? The same person that I talked to about the training not being different for them being here for 3 years is the same person who lost both their parents 6 months apart. And I had no idea. I was like, dang. And then his wife's engine blows up like 3 weeks later. And it's like, but hey, like go run the process, go into a stranger's home, go deliver 6 options, go convert, go sell, go get your average ticket up, sell a membership while you're at it. Now, I mean, look, I'm the most guilty of it. But like they're people, right? A dispatcher under pressure, it's just a human that's under pressure because they don't want to let down the field. They want to make decisions and optimize their route because they want them to have a life after work, right? Our teammates are probably going through things that are unseen every single day. So the Christmas truth, as is what they called it, reminds us that like people are not problems to be managed, right? People are humans that need to be led, that need to be guided. And, leadership is not about being hard. It's about being human without losing those standards. It's about maintaining high expectations, right? But still being a human being. So we talked about passive leadership. We talked about refusing to adapt. We talked about humanity as a leadership skill on the Christmas truth. And my favorite part about World War I, which I know feels a little messed up when you say my favorite part about worst global conflict in the history of the planet. There's this part where every once in a while, I think about this whole thing and it gives me chills. So a little bit of the background is, so American forces don't show up. We're late to the party because isolationism, we're off on, we hit the real estate jackpot in the United States. We have 2 large oceans and 2 very friendly countries. Like we got it made pretty well from a real estate perspective. So we stay out of the war. French morale at this point is completely broken. Units are exhausted. It's trench warfare. It's all these terrible things. So we get together this thing called the American Expeditionary Force. Wilson was very hell-bent on, I don't want the Americans to just kind of like plug in the gaps. Like I want our force to be very much like integrated into what it is we're trying to accomplish. So the American Expeditionary Forces served a huge role in Western France and taking back France. And at Belleau Wood, there was a Marine regiment, and the Marines show up. And there's this French field commander who comes up to, I want to say his last name's Wilson, and I want to say, I don't remember his rank. And he's like, hey, you and your men, before the German Imperial advance comes, you should go about a couple hundred yards back and start building trenches right now, so that your men can retreat and fall back upon them when you're overtaken. Now you got to remember, the Americans show up at this point. We're cocky, we're arrogant, we're confident. We're well rested because we haven't been fighting in a global conflict for 3 years. And there's a lot of Americans that are like really excited to fight, which looking back on it now feels a little messed up, but in context, right? That's a good thing you want when a war's going on. And this commander says back to this guy, he says, retreat? Hell, we just got here. Right? He's like, my men will hold where they stand. It gives me chills to this day. You show up in a foreign land and this conflict that you had nothing to do with, right? And for you to show up and have that level of confidence and resolve, and they did hold the line, right? And then it ends up being a transition point an inflection point in the war that allows for Allied advance across France, and then, as we know, eventually a German surrender. But it's like it changed the morale. And it makes me think about like how much like even like us, like as leaders, it's like everyone is going to read your tone. Everyone is going to borrow your confidence. Everyone is going to mirror either your urgency or your apathy. Like the power that you have every single day you show up knowing that whether you like it or not, or whether you realize it or not, people are looking up to you. And they're going to read your tone regardless of what it is. They're going to borrow your confidence or not if it's not there. And again, they're going to mirror either your urgency or your apathy. And so they're going to look to you on chaotic days. Your energy is going to become the team's energy. Their consistency is going to become the team's consistency. And that starts with you. Your consistency becomes the team's consistency, which becomes the company's consistency. Your steadiness is going to help them handle upset customers, right? It's going to help them. It's going to help them on tough calls. It's going to help them through tough days when a dispatcher calls in and we got to cover. All right. This is the part where I feel like often every single day when we come in here, it can almost feel like, hey, we're going through trench warfare right now, every single day. Right. And I think the only thing that's going to overcome that for us every single day that we start it, and we're gluttons for punishment because it resets every day, right, is the morale right, is the confidence that we bring, the urgency that we bring, and the morale that we bring to our teams. Like, that's what allows us to overcome the day. So ask yourself, like, am I refusing to dig some trenches a few hundred yards behind? Right? Am I refusing to do that? Am I going to stand and hold the line where I am every single day? Right? Because your team is going to draw its posture from your posture. If you hold the line, they will too. Thank you for entertaining World War I today. Quick recap. So we said number one was passive, right? Passive leadership. So we need to address issues early, right? If we're misaligned, then it can lead to us having to deal with even bigger problems down the road. Lesson 2 was leaders adapt, right? Old tactics are never going to win modern battles. Lesson number 3 is lead with humanity. Compassion is not a weakness. And lesson number 4 is hold the line. Like, your resolve is what steadies everyone else. As I was thinking about my commute home in the last 36 hours, I found this quote which says, "The greatest leaders aren't defined by victory or defeat, but how they lead when the pressure never lets up." And I couldn't think of a more realistic application for what it is we do every single day, because it's tough. But just remember, as tough it is for you, it's tougher for the people that go into strangers' homes every single day.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.